You have to understand that there's a long history of incredible, I don't know how to call it, delusions about Africa and sex, and black people and sex, that science, which is mostly white science, has been shot through with.
It is not true that Africans have more sex than other people. When you compare people who have more sex, Africans don't feature. You find them on the lower scale. Family lives tend to be more firmer than in the US. People tend to stick together as families. And so it is more complicated than just having too much sex and therefore getting too much AIDS.
How much of this is our desire in our culture to see black folks as hypersexual so that we will treat this as a sexually transmitted disease? And having defined it as a sexually transmitted disease, we're only going to look at sex and at solutions that are aimed at dealing with sexuality. We won't look for other possible causes of a lot of what we're seeing. I had a conversation with a dentist who, for example, is convinced that in very, very poor communities with high background rates of HIV infection, people who do dentistry don't always practice appropriate infection control. They don't autoclave their instruments. They're much more likely to just dip stuff in alcohol or just wipe things off. And the suggestion has been made, well, maybe everything from tattooing to going to see a dentist who's rather careless in what he does about infection control could account for some of what we're seeing. The issue isn't so much that that's the answer. It's rather that it's a possible explanation that nobody is exploring because it goes so much against the grain of conventional thinking, where everybody's saying, but of course it's the sex. It's black people, isn't it?
And study after study has shown that sexual patterns in Africa are not particularly different than sexual patterns in the United States or Europe. And some people have a lot and some people have none and everything in between.
Yeah, Caucasian kids, they definitely have sex. Yeah, they bang, but it's just that we're looked down upon more than they are when it comes to sex.
Do you think black people have more sex than others?
Black people, in general, usually have sex earlier than others, but the amount of sex that is more than others is slight, but very slight. It does not account for the different rates of infection that we see.
You can get HIV from unprotected sex, blood-to-blood contact, and breast milk. In terms of unprotected sex, anal sex has the highest risk for HIV. That's because the tissues in the anus are especially delicate and easy for the virus to penetrate. Vaginal sex has the second highest risk, and oral sex has the lowest.
It's getting better.
Dr. Peter Mugini is the director of the largest HIV/AIDS clinic and research center in Africa. It's in Kampala, Uganda. He came to Pittsburgh so that we could interview him. Both Dr. Mugini and Dr. Thomas told us it's not the amount of sex we have that increases HIV. It's that some of us have multiple partners. That creates sexual networks, which are superhighways for HIV. In some African cultures, men can have several wives, automatically creating sexual networks.
So within the marriage partnerships, people get more AIDS than outside. Maybe one of the partners gets another sexual partner, and then the AIDS comes in the families.
In America, Thomas says, sexual networks exist because there are fewer men than women in many black communities. One of the main reasons for that is prison.
The number of men who go to prison is 10 times greater than the number of women. So the male-female ratio is going to change. And men are going to become kind of a rare thing in the community. That's going to affect sexual behavior.
The men who remain in Black communities have the power to have sex with several partners if they choose.
Men now have a lot more power than they did before. He's going to say, if you ask me to be faithful to you, then I'm just not going to bother with you. I'll go find somebody else who won't look so closely, somebody who won't care so much.
They also have the power to insist on unprotected sex.
If Bubba is the baby's daddy, and he's got Shaniqua and Tyrese and Maybelline and Mary, and he's the baby daddy for all of them, everybody is at risk. And if Shaniqua, Tyrese, Mary are not in proper care, not only is she at risk, but her children are at risk too. And just like it's happening in parts of Sub-Saharan Africa, it is happening right here in America with all the baby daddy, baby mama, and the children that they create.